it's Reagan, and today I'm here to bring you my January wrap-up. This video is being sponsored in part by Wednesday Books. Now, for the month of January, I read a total of 5 books. And overall, I would say I'm very happy with that number. I read a lot of books I really loved. I did want to read a little more, but 5 books is really great considering my Survivor addiction that also reared its head this month, which ended up taking up a lot of my time. Anyway, without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive right in. So the first book I'm going to talk about, actually the first 2 books I'm going to talk about coincide with the same series. The first book I read this month was Magic Study by Marie V. Snyder, and I also read Fire Study by Marie V. Snyder, the second and the third book to the original Study trilogy, and I have to say overall I absolutely loved reading this series so much. I cannot express to you how good these are. I mean, I'm gonna do my best. That's kind of like my job in this whole internet thing. The first novel to the Study series, Poison Study, I would say is very, very good, but it's also kind of contained. It's very much only exists within the castle that Yelena lives in, and she kind of passes her day as a poison taster. And while it's, you know, political, it's very limited in its scope in terms of not only geography, but also Yelena's role in all of it. Versus these next 2 books really expand not only Yelena's role, but the world. I just felt like all of the lands that we visited, and we get to meet all different types of cultures and tribes, just really made this landscape so much richer, and therefore something I really enjoy. My favorite book in the entire trilogy is actually the second book, Magic Study, which I find to be almost a little surprising, only because I feel like this book has kind of mixed reviews. I remember when I was initially talking about it, I either had comments left on videos saying how much they loved this book or how much they hated this book. So I was very interested to see where I fell, and I have to say, I loved it. This book ends right where the first one leaves off, and we follow Yelena as she goes to magic school. That's right, magic school. This story is definitely not just contained in kind of a magic scholarly setting. Yelena goes on all sorts of different types of adventures. She gets to meet her family and stuff like that, and it just adds a lot of new emotional layers as well with family and friend dynamics that she didn't really have to experience in the first book for a variety of different reasons that I won't go into because spoilers. But this was so good. I ended up giving the second book a 5 out of 5 stars, and the third book, which I felt like was a wonderful conclusion to the original trilogy, 4.5 out of 5 stars. They were both so good, and I'm so happy I started out the year reading these 2 novels. From there, I picked up the Peruse-topia Book Club Piketty Month for the month of January, and this month, Sasha and I decided to read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Now this is kind of a book that I feel like is taking BookTube by storm. People are pretty jazzed about this novel, and so I was pretty excited going into this, and I have to say it did not disappoint. I have a full non-spoiler review which I'll leave below if you want a little more specifics, but spoiler alert, I really loved this book. This is a story that follows our main character Jude, who at the beginning of the story is kidnapped by her mother's first husband, who comes and kills her mother and her real father, and takes her twin sister, and her half-sister back to the Fae world. There she is raised, and Jude kind of passes her time learning sword fighting and strategy in a ways to kind of gain power, because she herself is surrounded by deadly, beautiful, yet cruel creatures that basically pass their time trying to figure out ways to entertain themselves, which could ultimately lead to Jude's death. They're not nice, cool people. Specifically, there is one character named Carden who Jude has basically an arch rivalry with. At the beginning of this novel, Jude is kind of presented an opportunity that would kind of give her an access to power that she never thought she would previously, and she takes it, and she kind of finds herself part of a spy network, and from there she gets involved in all sorts of politics, a lot of them, and it's so good. I don't know, I love a good dark fae tale, and I feel like Holly Black just delivers so well with this. The writing is lyrical and twisted, and this also has elements to it that I don't usually find in fae. We have a school setting, because Jude is literally just like trying to exist as a fae child. Essentially, that's how she was raised, but she's not. So she does all of the like activities that fae are, which I feel like we don't usually get that perspective. Anyway, this book was dark and wonderful, and I really, really loved it. It ended on quite the cliffhanger, and I cannot wait for the next book in this series. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read this month was Between the Blade and the Heart by Amanda Hocking. Now this is a paranormal, fantastical story that is described kind of like a mix between Blade Runner, Game of Thrones with Norse mythology thrown in. Some of those I agree with, some of those I don't. Specifically, I think the Blade Runner is a great way to describe the setting. This follows our main character, Malin, who has been raised as a Valkyrie her whole life. She goes to a school where she's basically taught and trained to kill immortal beings. Because in this world, mortals and immortals exist together, like they coexist, and they know of the existence of the other two, which I feel like adds an incredibly interesting layer to the story. But to essentially keep balance, Valkyries are trained to kill immortals because immortal beings can live forever and also kind of have their fate and main personality traits decided for them by the gods. But because they can live forever and their paths are decided, they needed to have a system to essentially end immortal life when the time comes, and that's where Valkyries come in. They kind of keep the balance. At the beginning of the story, Malin is very set and strict in her Valkyrie training, and she's really honestly just trying to get over her ex-girlfriend who is always constantly on her mind. But then she kind of gets raveled into this mystery. It started with discovering a mistake that her mother made in the past, and from there she kind of goes deep into the dark secrets of the Valkyrie world, and we see her like kick a lot of butt and do a lot of kissing, and I would say it was highly entertaining. This is a novel that I feel like is just a lot of fun. I wouldn't describe this as like a mind-blowing book, but I wasn't really going into it expecting that at all. I wanted to go into this having kind of a sexy, fast-paced, full of kick-butting and paranormalness, and that's exactly what this book delivered. It was highly entertaining, highly addicting. I was constantly turning the pages. I also found the setting to be really unique. It had this futuristic science fiction kind of grim setting with this Norse mythology element, which I thought was really cool, and I personally really enjoyed. I felt like it added not only a unique flair to a story and setting that we sometimes see in YA, but I also thought it added some really cool, interesting plot layers as well. Yes, but at the end of the day, I found this book very entertaining. I literally read it in 2 days, so I think that speaks to its entertainment factor, and I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It was really good. And the last book I read this January was one that definitely left a lasting imprint on me, and also probably took me the longest, but for good reason, and that is The City of Brass by S.J. Chakraborty. Now, this is an Own Voices Muslim fantasy tale, and it is so rich in history. I feel like I have so much to say, so let's just get started. This is a novel that follows our main character, Nahari, and she currently lives in 18th century Cairo, Egypt, and there she basically makes her living by being a thief and con artist. At the beginning of the story, she also accidentally summons a warrior genie who then transports her to an magical genie land. She also discovers some of her own family history and her blood and magic and all sorts of things like that. It's just so cool. But this book is so rich in plot and setting that I could spend hours talking about it, but just kind of give you a perspective. The author is actually a scholar in Islamic history and also Middle Eastern history, and you can totally see that in this book. I mean, not only was her ability to craft an entirely new fantastical world that was obviously very much inspired by real history, it was just so rich, and you could just see and smell and understand everything. It was just such a wonderful setting to actually read because it was just so well thought out that I just cannot give the author more props. But then with that, she also had a setting of Cairo, and she was able to really give a rich historical background of Cairo in the 18th century, and you could really get that sense as well. This is a novel that has a lot of politics, and she definitely takes the approach of more realistic politics, of things slowly build on each other. Because of that, I would say maybe the beginning, middle is a little slow, only because there's so much to first get a grounding in. There's so many genie politics in here that it's honestly, I don't want to use the word confusing, but I definitely had to pay attention. But once you kind of get that grounding, you get completely enraptured in the whole situation. Where Nahari ends up going to is an incredibly complex and dangerous place in a lot of ways, because people have magical powers and can kill you if they don't like you, basically. It is a city divided by different groups, and each group has a lot of ancestral hatred to the other groups. and therefore there is a lot of prejudice and as well as laws that are prejudiced. While she definitely explores this prejudice as a group level, we get perspectives of individuals that are a part of all of these different groups as well. So you kind of get an empathy for each human, and it also makes you realize how unbelievably complex this political situation is that cannot be resolved in 200 pages of someone just like showing up and saving the day. It's going to take time, and it's going to take many books to even begin to scratch the surface of this whole situation, which is something I have a lot of respect and appreciation for, because I feel like this author just did an amazing job. That being said, this is a wonderful, fantastical plot line. The last 100 pages were completely mind-blowing, and just I could not flip the pages faster. These characters are incredible and flawed, but so interesting. I mentioned the politics are just completely just captivating and so difficult to pick what path you would go down. That being said, this was so good and so rich in storytelling, so wonderful to read. I could not recommend it more. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, only for that kind of slow bit in the middle, but I mean, this book picks up speed so quickly and is such a great read. I loved it. Alrighty guys, that is my January wrap up. Let me know down below some books you've read recently that you've really loved, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!